I am now. Hey, everybody. Welcome back for book club and chapter 13 of Nancy Drew and the Secret of the Golden Pavilion. And as we left Nancy last time, her and her friends George and Bess were visiting the neighbors of the ponds to find more information about them, because that is the family that the people who are claiming to be relatives of Mr. Sakamaki are staying, and they want to know more about them. Chapter 13, A Valuable Discovery. The girls found most of the pond's neighbors in their gardens. Nancy, Bess, and George discreetly inquired of one after another if they were acquainted with the couple. In each case, the answer was the same. The Ponds had rented the house very recently, and no one knew them. They appeared to be unsociable and were away from the house a great deal. Are they Hawaiians? Nancy asked an elderly man. Oh, I think not. I'm sure that they are from the mainland, he replied. When the girls returned to the car, one of the women to whom she had spoken earlier was waiting for them. Nancy wondered if she had further information, but the woman merely smiled and asked if the girls were going into Honolulu. Upon learning that they were, she asked for a lift, explaining that her husband was using their car that day for a business trip. We'd be happy to, said Nancy, and they all got in. On the way, the passenger, whose name was Mrs. Ayres, pointed to a thickly branched tree with dense foliage. That is a monkey pod, she said. Many of them grow on the island of Kauai, and the wood is brought here to make into attractive pieces. I'm going to a shop now that specializes in these pieces to buy a wedding gift. The tree certainly looks top-heavy, Bess replied. Its long limbs seem to be way out of proportion with the size of its trunk. Is the wood hard? George asked. Yes, Miss Ayres answered. It's a very durable and won't warp or crack. I'd like to look at some of the wooden pieces, Nancy remarked. We want to take home some gifts, and this is a good chance to purchase them. When they reached the Waikiki Beach section, Mrs. Ayres told Nancy where to park, and the four walked to the shop. After looking over the many attractive articles of display, George selected a snack server, Bess a tray, and Nancy a salad bowl with wooden fork and spoon. Not far from here, Mrs. Ayres told the girls, is an extremely interesting jewelry shop. It specializes in ivory pieces. If you have time, I'd suggest you drop in there. She went to the door with the girls and pointed out the shop. With a thank you so much and an aloha to Mrs. Ayres, the three hurried up the street and entered the jewelry store. The display case intrigued the girls. Ivory pins, earrings, necklaces, and bracelets were delicately carved in patterns of various Hawaiian flowers. I see just the right gift for Aunt Eloise, said Nancy, and asked the clerk the price of a pin and earring set carved in the ginger flower design. Will you mail this directly to New York? Nancy inquired. I'd be very glad to, the clerk replied. After the sale was completed, the girls returned to the convertible, and this time headed straight for Kalakula. As they parked in the driveway, Ned greeted them with a friendly gib. For Pete's sake, where have you been? We boys appeared Here we boys speared the biggest fish of the season, and we've waited and waited hours for you to come home and admire it. The girls laughed. What is it, and where is it? George asked. It's an ula, said Ned, and what time we had capturing the old boy. He was a real fighter and towed our outrigger along as if it were a feather. Only Bess was impressed. Nancy and George were sure the story was grossly exaggerated. Grinning, Nancy said, "Come on, Ned. Tell us the truth. How big is this fish?" "Follow me," Ned suggested, and they all trooped off to the kitchen. The ula, minus its head, tail, and fins, lay in the kitchen table, and the girls had to admit that it was a good-sized fish. "We may as well tell you the truth," Dave spoke up. "Hero Ned speared this fish all by himself, underwater, but I guess it wasn't too much of a battle." Ned grinningly admitted that it had not been too hard to spear the fish. "We're going to have it for lunch," he stated, "so we've all better go for a swim and work up an appetite." Hannah grew and smiled. "But not too big an appetite," she said. "Mr. and Miss Armstrong telephoned, and they're going to serve a native feast tonight at a luau." "How exciting," spoke up Bess, who was always ready to eat. The Drews' housekeeper went on to say that the Armstrongs had invited the mainlanders to come to their home for the feast, but Hannah had told them that Nancy and the others probably would not want to be away from Kalakula for so many hours because of the mystery. "So the Armstrongs offered to come here and prepare the feast," she announced. "Kiabu says there is a pit in the garden where pigs were roasted for luau's years ago. He is going to fix it up and heat the lava rock which is put into the pit. The pig has to be steamed." "I can't wait," Bess remarked, and began to lick her lips in anticipation of the feast. As Nancy glanced toward Ned, she detected a slightly hurt expression on his face. "It won't taste any better than this fish," she said quickly. The young man beamed at her, then said, "Nancy, the undersea life offshore here is fascinating. I dare you to go skin diving with me to see it." "I'll do it," Nancy agreed. "Tomorrow. It's a date." Everyone enjoyed the ula at lunch. Directly afterward, Nancy suggested that the whole group go on an exhaustive search of the premises to try learning what Grandfather Sakamaki's secret might be. Walls were tapped for hollow spaces. Floors and ceilings were inspected for trapdoors. Nothing came to light. Finally, Bess, heaving a great sigh, remarked, "I'm afraid that Grandpa Sakamaki was just spoofing. He just didn't want this estate to go out of the hands of the family, so he made up the whole thing." The group was in the living room. George had crawled beneath a heavy teakwood table and was tapping the underside. Suddenly, the others heard her give a squeal of amazement. "I found a hidden drawer!" she exclaimed. At once, the other young people were down on hands and knees, crowding close to under the table. "There's a panel that slides. It must be a secret drawer." "Yes, here it is, and there are some things in it," George cried out gleefully. Bert helped her lift out the hidden drawer, which was filled with small, dark wooden statues. One by one, the objects were set on the table. "What a find!" said Ned enthusiastically. "I'll bet these are ancient and valuable." When Kiabo was summoned, he gazed in awe and amazement at the figurines. He had never seen them before. He, too, thought they were old and that Mr. Sakamaki Sr. would never have taken the trouble to hide them unless they were valuable. "I know Mr. Unai at the museum," he said. "Maybe he could come up here and look at them." Nancy thought this was a good idea and asked Kiabu to put it in the call to Mr. Unai. In a little while, the Polynesian expert arrived. The small, bright-eyed curator examined each piece carefully. Finally, he declared that the statuettes were very old and authentic, but not ancient. "The museum would like very much to have these," Mr. Unai said. "Perhaps the estate would sell or donate them to us later. In the meantime, I believe they would be much safer locked up down there than they would be here. I understand that there have been some strange happenings at Kalakula." "Yes," Kiabu answered. "One can never seem to tell when there may be prying eyes. Now that these pieces have been found, I think they should be taken away and put into a safe." Nancy offered to call Mr. Dutton and ask his advice on the matter. When the executor learned of the discovery, he agreed that the museum was the place for the statuettes. Miss Drew, will you please write out a receipt with a full description of each piece and ask Mr. Unai to sign it? He requested. Also, I'd appreciate it if you'd send someone to the bank with it. I'd be very happy to, Nancy replied. I'll ask the boys to accompany Mr. Unai to the museum, then deliver the receipt to you. Very good, said Mr. Dutton. Kiabu supplied paper and pen, and Nancy wrote down a detailed account of each object. Most of the statuettes represented ancient gods of the Polynesians, but others were of former Hawaiian kings. After the boys had left with Mr. Unai, Kiabu went back to the garden where he had been cleaning out the old fire pit, in which the pig for the feast would be roasted. Near it, he had built a raging bonfire in a depression of the garden. On the ground stood a bucket of water. Every once in a while, Kiabu would lift a sample rock from the fire and a huge pair of tongs and drop it into the water, apparently to test the intensity of the heat. Hannah said that she was going out to the garden to sit in the shade near the picnic spot and rest. She invited the girls to join her when they finished searching. I think we should quit work now, Bess stated. If we don't, we'll all be worn out for the party tonight. Nancy was reluctant to leave the job unfinished, but she realized that since arriving at Kalakula, she had not spent much time with Hannah. So she decided to follow her to the garden. The group of four seated themselves in comfortable chairs, their backs to an area where the fire was burning. Kiabu left his task and walked to the house. Reaching the porch, he turned to look back and stood transfixed with horror. A furtive figure had appeared from the bushes. Quick as a flash, the man had grabbed up the huge fire tongs lying on the ground and was about to heave them toward Nancy. Oh no, what's going to happen? Watch me read chapter 14, Meeting a Shark. We'll see what happens with Nancy and her friends next.